Ladies and gentlemen, today is Orlando Magic Media Day, and you're listening to the 407. We've got a recap of Franz and Paolo's off seasons, plus 3 big questions for the start of the 24-25 season. Don't go anywhere. The 407 starts now. Happy Media Day, everybody. We finally made it to the end of the 2024 offseason. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. We have some amazing stuff coming up. I've been so excited to record this, the inaugural episode of the 407, and I see no reason not to jump right into it, talking about our guys, Franz and Paolo. We're going to start by taking a look at Franz's summer. Some summers in review, basically, is kind of what I figure we'll do. We'll look at the offseason. So once again, starting with Franz. Franz in France is what I'm calling this one. Germany had a pretty solid outing at the Olympics this summer. You may have expected a little bit more from them, as they were the FIBA World Cup champions the prior summer, but, altogether a rather good outing, considering America had to send the Avengers and, Giannis and Jokic and all the others, right? We're there to try to put this young upstart German team in their place, led by Dennis Schroeder and Franz Wagner. Franz having a rather solid outing at the Olympics. 18 points per game, 6 rebounds, 3 assists on 47-20. 88 splits. The three-point shot did not come back for Franz at the Olympics. I know many of us were hoping, maybe praying, that his three-pointer would come back into frame a little bit, but I don't know if it's just exhaustion from the full season plus that 7-game series with the Cavs going straight into the Olympics that had his legs dead tired, but he did not look great from beyond the arc. A slightly different arc than we have in the NBA as well. A little bit shorter on that one compared to his 23-24 season, which was 20 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists. It was very clear that Germany just wanted him to go out and do his thing, right? You watched a lot of the games, you watched a lot of the actions that they ran with Franz, and they trusted him to be the guy whenever Schroeder wasn't doing his greatest German point guard of all time act. Schroeder, once again, looked amazing on the international stage. If he could bring that to Brooklyn this season, I imagine they would be a much different looking team. But the big headline here is Franz's three-point shooting. He was 36% in 22-23, down to 28% last year, and 20% in the Olympics. Obviously, the thing most non-Magic fans are going to remember about Franz's season is how he ended the year with that abysmal shooting performance in Game 7. Basically, I'm not going to say single-handedly losing the game, but it dug a hole that was rather hard to dig yourself out of, right? So Franz has a lot to prove, I think, especially after being paid going into his 4th season. I really think that he has the opportunity, if he can get that jump shot back, to be an all-star-ish sort of player, that all-star reserve sort of mold. I'm obviously very high on Franz. I love the way he plays. I love the cutting. I love the attitude he has. He's a really solid defender in a way that not a lot of people talk about. I know Magic fans talk about it quite a bit, but I think more access to strong defense in important games is going to get everybody else in the league and the people kind of following the league understanding the kind of defender Franz can be and is. So that's really exciting. I think that what we really do need to see from Franz is that perimeter jump shot come back. If he can't get that back this year, I do have genuine concerns for Franz's place on this team moving forward, because whether we like it or not, we need shooters around Paolo, and Franz has to be a shooter in most circumstances, right? Moving on to Paolo this summer. Paolo had a very fun summer. He was not invited to the U.S. Olympic team despite being on their FIBA World Cup roster, which isn't super surprising considering that FIBA roster underperformed by most metrics. And frankly, he was not likely to get picked underneath the myriad of other guys that also did not get an invite, Kyrie Irving, Jaylen Brown, etc. Although when Kawhi went down and they decided to sub him out, there was a part of me that did wonder if Paolo was going to get that invite. Obviously, it did not come to pass, but I would have loved to see him out there. I really do think that he could have contributed, although if Tatum wasn't going to play, which he didn't, maybe Paolo wasn't going to play. But he spent most of the summer hanging out with some Nike guys. We saw his new Nike logo. Looks great. Excited for the hopefully inevitable shoe drop. I can be on the wait list for that one, obviously. But very exciting stuff. Paolo raising his star, I think, around the league this summer is kind of what I took his presentation with those other Nike guys as, right? He's trying to be named in the same breath as, a Jason Tatum, a Bam Adebayo, a Devin Booker. He wants to be sort of that next up. And I think that's absolutely the place for him. I think that's absolutely where he's at in his career. Just needing to improve around the margins in a way that is productive for himself and the other guys on the roster, right? I think currently you see a lot of Paolo around the league as kind of he can score, but are the Magic a good team? Is he, is it good player, bad team, garbage time buckets? Similar conversations to, I think, what we've seen around Zach LaVine over the years. Although the difference between LaVine and Paolo is LaVine's efficiency has been better, right? Which kind of gets me into this sort of next bit of the conversation around Paolo, which is who are these guys that he needs to be compared to? Right, I know he is only going into year 3. He's so young still, so much time to develop. But I do think a lot of people around the league are comparing him to other guys, and he doesn't stack up favorably against them. I've grabbed some stats here that compare him to Tatum, Edwards, and LeBron. Tatum being, the sort of Duke wing mold that a lot of, I think, people like to imagine he follows. I don't think their games are particularly similar, but a lot of people would argue that they're similar enough and they have similar sort of backgrounds in their sort of coaching history, things of that nature. Anthony Edwards, another young star. It's a fair comparison to make, I think. And then LeBron is the guy that he has drawn comparisons to as the seasons have gone on and as more and more minutes have been logged. People look at his game and they go, I see a little bit of LeBron there, which is exciting and terrifying at the same time. It's scary in the sense that he can be that guy night in and night out. There's a lot of angst going to be going on in the league if it turns out we do have a guy like that on our roster. Starting with effective field goal percentage. This is the one you go on Reddit, you go on Twitter, you say, I love Paolo. He's really good. And the very first thing you're going to see is a quant in the replies, right, who has pulled up effective field goal percentages for the last few years. And frankly, Paolo doesn't fare favorably. He's 130th of 140 players on Basketball Reference. Tatum at 71, Edwards at 110, and LeBron at 17. Obviously, what does this say? Well, this says LeBron is hyper efficient, and we know that, right? We know that about LeBron and his game. Edwards, however, lower than I expected. Tatum as well, lower than I expected. Which begs the question, is this overblown? Is this whole efficiency thing not that big of a deal? Frankly, I do think we're venturing into the sort of overblown territory. Would you like to see him be more efficient? Absolutely. Yes. I would love to see him plant his feet for a pass every now and then. Sometimes he gives me these RJ Hampton impressions where I see him driving and then kicking, but the kick is occurring. Those of you that watched RJ Hampton with the Magic will know what I'm talking about, where he sprints at 1,000 miles an hour towards the baseline. He jumps out of bounds. He's in the third row, and then he two-arm throws a pass back out to the perimeter, and then it sails out the back of the opposite end of the court. Obviously, an over-dramatization of what's happening here, but I do think Paolo has the opportunity to improve his playmaking, to improve some of his decision-making, especially in that sort of low post area when you see the defense collapse. If he's not able to get up for a shot, right, figuring out a way for him to get the ball out. Obviously, we have some new additions that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes that are going to make that easier for him. But, I do think there are things that he can improve. Some of his shot selection is a little bit hero bally. The comps to Melo are where those kind of come in. You see him bully people, but then he's also taking tons of shots. I mean, some things that I was very excited about were the fact that we had the opportunity to see him shoot better from three than we've ever seen him shoot before. That was exciting, right? And that's the kind of efficiency jump that I think is important for him. And, again, bringing in new guys like KCP, who we'll talk about, or Tristan da Silva, or seeing what some of those guys on the bench like Jet Howard could maybe bring as far as shooting goes, I think those kinds of things will increase his efficiency. He doesn't have to be forcing a shot up because he doesn't want to kick out to Markelle Fultz in the corner, right? Which is, I think, exciting for us as a fan base. Moving on, PER 64 of 185 eligible players. Tatum at 14, Edwards at 36, and LeBron at 6. Once again, that would be, kind of a mark of his sort of efficiency. He could improve, which we talked about, but I do think it's a good place to be. Win shares 70 of an eligible 570 players. Tatum's at 10, Edwards is at 28, and LeBron is at 17. I think we're going to see a jump from Paolo this year as far as win shares are concerned, which is exciting. I think this team is likely going to win more games, and he's going to be a big part of that. And finally, usage percentage. He's 17th in the league. Tatum 14th, Edwards 5th, and LeBron 21st. We're seeing Paolo climb in a lot of these rankings, and I think this season will be really big for him. I'd love to see him make another All-Star game. I don't know how likely that is. Obviously, it is the East, so with Randall being shipped out to the Wolves, maybe he has a better opportunity. Obviously, Cat coming from the Wolves. That one just kind of sort of fresh on my mind as it just happened, but we'll see. I do think it's highly possible that he'll make another All-Star team. I'd love to see him make another All-Star team. Frankly, if he never missed one again, that would be ideal. But it's just exciting stuff from Paolo. We're going to see his star rise a little bit more. The All-NBA chatter, I think, is going to be something we hear a little bit about as the season progresses, and especially as we get to the end of the season, if we can hold on to a sort of top 5 seed. I think we're going to hear a little bit more about that. Moving on to some of our new additions this summer. We got KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, coming in from the Denver Nuggets, signing a 3-year deal with the Magic. KCP is a winner. It's exactly the kind of guy I'd want us to get on the roster. So excited. I can't tell you how many times over the past few years I have watched, and you Magic fans have watched too, kickouts to the corner. No one's there except for one guy, and you're like, oh my God, what a kick out, what an amazing pass. And it's Markelle Fultz, right? It's Franz on a bad shooting night, right? It's going to be Anthony Black, who, while he has shot well, does not take very many shots. KCP is 40% from 3 on about 4 shots per game. Elite defense, once again, a winning player, and he's replacing sort of the following minutes, and I'm going to list them out here. Anthony Black in 33 games, shooting 39% from 3 on 1 attempt a game. Gary Harris in 27 games, shooting 37% from 3 on 4 shots per game. Markelle Fultz in 18 games, 22% from 3 on basically no shots, right? And Caleb Houston, 13 games, 37% from 3 on 1 attempt per game. KCP can shoot at volume. He can shoot it efficiently. I think that he is an amazing addition that sort of rounds out our roster in an exciting way. I know a lot of people wanted to see us grab some sort of primary ball handler. I can understand that desire. I still think that might be something that gets addressed closer to the deadline, especially after we see where we stack up in this sort of rebuild Eastern Conference when you've seen a bunch of guys come over and a bunch of teams deciding that they're going for it this year. I'll be really excited to see what we do with that, because I do think we have a lot of movable contracts, which is part of some of our questions for the early season. Looking forward to Tristan da Silva, our big draft pick from the NBA draft this year, a 4-year college player out of Colorado, 39% from 3 on 5 attempts per game. It's going to be important to remember about Tristan da Silva that he is currently older than Jalen Suggs, right? He's a 4-year player that makes him one of the older players on the roster, despite him coming in as a rookie. It's not going to be a situation where I think we can give him a ton of runway to kind of see who he is. This isn't quite like a Caleb Houston situation. I do think that we need to see from Tristan da Silva pretty quickly the kind of guy he is and whether or not he can hack it in an NBA offense and defense, frankly, because we do need him to play defense. He's a switching defender who probably cannot play small ball 5. From what I can tell, he just doesn't quite have the body for it, which is fine. If he can switch 2 through 4, I think that will be nice for us, especially as a guy that's frankly going to be coming in off the bench at any given time. He's going to be probably filling those Isaac minutes if Isaac ever has some sort of injury designation, right? And then he plays good off-ball defense. Again, it's kind of like Isaac Light, right? We're going to see if he can be at least half the player he is in those minutes. And hopefully, if you get them on the court at the same time, I imagine that's going to be a huge deterrent for backup guards, backup wings, trying to get their team going off the bench, right? You're driving into the paint, you got Isaac on one side, Tristan da Silva on the other, and then Mo Wagner or Goga Patadze, but depending on the matchup, right, standing there to sort of deny the rim. I think that's going to be great for us in stretches. So super exciting stuff. I like what I've seen from Tristan da Silva. Obviously super excited about KCP. We're going to see what it looks like on the floor, obviously, but I'm expecting a lot more threes. I'm expecting a higher efficiency of threes. I'm expecting a little bit closer to what Coach Mose has talked about since he started, right? Playing with pace and space in the past, right? I think we're going to see even more of that now that we have these sort of additions. All right, moving on to our 3 questions for the start of the 2024-2025 season. So excited that we are back in basketball season. We're early in the morning when I'm recording this on Monday the 30th, so have not seen anything from Media Day yet. Obviously, that's something that we'll talk about on the next episode, assuming there's anything really of note. I mean, Media Day is mostly for fun, right? And then we're going to get our sort of gifts and sound bites that we'll use throughout the year at that. Hopefully we learned something interesting about how these off seasons went, but I'm not expecting anything super consequential to come from it. First question for the start of this season: who takes the final rotation minutes? So starters, I think, are pretty much locked in, if not locked in already, right? It's going to be Jalen Suggs, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, and Wendell Carter Jr. Off the bench, I have to imagine Cole Anthony is locked in, Jonathan Isaac is locked in, right? With those guys plus Mo Wagner, right? I would assume you can also lock in there. That's 8 deep, right? I know that during the regular season we do play more guys, but that is 8 deep, and I imagine unless someone breaks through, that's what the playoff rotation is probably going to be like if everything goes sort of wash through the season. So who does take those final 2 to 3 rotation spots? Obviously, it'll depend on matchups, but Anthony Black, Caleb Houston, Tristan da Silva, Gary Harris, Jet Howard, and Goga Patadze all are not playing currently, based on what I just sort of lined out. There's some guys there that you really need to see what they are for you. Anthony Black, Caleb Houston, and Jet Howard, I think all have the opportunity to contribute on NBA rosters, right? I think they're good players, and I think that especially in Anthony Black's case, I think could be a really good player. We have to see more from those guys. Tristan da Silva as well, right? As a guy that we haven't seen at all. He's old again. He's older than Jalen Suggs. He's older than all three of those other guys. And again, he doesn't have a spot right now in the rotation. So interested to see how we mix those guys in through the year. And kind of what happens there. Also, Gary Harris and Gogo Batadze. Corey Joseph is in here as well. I'm not expecting Corey Joseph to get minutes, nor do I expect our two-way guys, barring catastrophic injury, right? Gogo will see play at some point. Gogo will see play down the line. I'm not super worried about him. Not to mention, there was desire from other teams around the league, including the Knicks, to take a look at Goga as a possible sort of guy that you could sign. So, he is a trade candidate maybe through the season, which kind of brings me to my next sort of sub-question here is what does consolidation for this roster look like and when does it happen? I love all these guys. I love all of them. When you come to Orlando, I think that we as a fan base do a really good job of appreciating the guys that come in and decide to wear these jerseys and decide to rep our city. So it's super sad, I would say, to think that some of these guys can't stay forever. And especially in the case of a guy like Cole Anthony or Gary Harris, I'm not sure that they should stay forever. We do need to consolidate a little bit. I think some of the bench minutes I think could improve, right? I think especially with the draft capital that we have, because we do have all of our picks. We have the Denver first this year, top 5 protected, which I'm not expecting to convey for them. We should have that pick, right, as well as all of our own draft capital and some extra seconds and maybe a distant first here or there. I'm not super up to date on what our draft capital looks like. I just know we have all of our stuff. But you take a look at how some of our salaries are structured. Wendell Carter, Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, and if you add, let's say, Anthony Black or Jet Howard, that's $40 million in salary, roughly. It's like 38-ish, I think. That's a lot of money. You could bring in a near max player on that kind of salary, right? So you have to, I think, if you're the front office, obviously you don't want to go out and get a guy and accelerate the timeline too much, right? If you don't think that this team is ready to win right now, which the way the East looks this year, I don't know if it's wise for us to maybe go all in this year. But, maybe we get through the season, we get through the gauntlet that we have coming up, which we'll discuss. And you perform really well. Maybe we are heading into Christmas, 10 games over 500 or something crazy like that. And now all of a sudden there is a desire to sort of expedite the timeline a little bit. What does that consolidation look like? I have a list of guys here. These are just guys, basically. I'm not feeling any particular way about any of them. I'll communicate the ones that I do particularly like, but ultimately, I don't want this to come off as an endorsement that we need to be moving a bunch of salary this season, because I don't think that's the case. Some guys under contract that may or may not become available, just depending on their situations. LaMelo Ball, obviously, there were talks about him maybe not signing his extension back in the day. I don't think Charlotte's getting rid of LaMelo anytime soon, but obviously they have new personnel in there, new coaching staffs, things like that may not be as attached to him. The front office may be waning a little bit. LaMelo on this team, I don't know what that looks like. It seems exciting. He does shoot the ball a lot, and he does keep the ball out of Franz and Paolo's hands. Some of our fan base is not going to like that, right? Totally get it. In the same way that they don't like the idea of Trae Young. Trae Young has been rather disgruntled in Atlanta. He's been unhappy with sort of the way that the team has sort of built that around him. Obviously, the DeJounte Murray trade did not work out. He's now in New Orleans, taking off the plate of Zion and Brandon Ingram. But it's at least something I think to look at. I wrote down DeAndre Ayton here. I don't know. In hindsight, I don't know why I wrote down DeAndre Ayton. I don't think that's a good fit for this roster. He doesn't shoot, right? He doesn't shoot threes. He is sort of an offensive guy, but I don't know if he's really that much better than Wendell Carter at this point in his career, and he's significantly more expensive. Lauri Markkanen is a guy who is obviously not available. He just signed a contract extension. He's not going to get traded, I believe, this season. But moving forward, if Utah isn't able to build out around him, Lauri Markkanen seems like the kind of guy that you could bring in, and he'll make your lineups a little bit more interesting, right? Now, all of a sudden, maybe we're running Franz, Paolo, Markkanen as sort of our front court wing selection, right? He's obviously not Kristaps Porzingis. I saw some people referencing, oh, he's like our perfect Porzingis for our Celtics impression we seemingly are doing. I don't think that's the case, but I do like the idea of having a guy like Markkanen on the roster. Nick Claxton is a really interesting piece, very good defensively. I don't think that it's maybe a good idea. I know that the three ball for him has always been hypothetical. Even going back to college, I got a buddy who's a Nets fan who's always like, well, people talked about Nick Claxton shooting threes. We haven't seen it yet. But, maybe that's something that can be unlocked. I know Goga was the same way, and near the end of the season, Goga took a couple of threes, and they didn't look bad, right? So, just a little bit of development there for him. The biggest two that I'm interested in as a Magic fan are Darius Garland and Anthony Simons. Garland, obviously, after the second round against Boston, there were whispers that he would not stay on the roster if Donovan Mitchell did decide to sign an extension and stay. Obviously, that's come to pass, and Darius Garland is still on the roster. So we'll see how the Kenny Atkinson experience goes in Cleveland, but I think Garland really is a guy that can do a lot for this team. I don't know what it would take to, again, I don't know what it would take to get any of these guys. I'm not pretending to understand. I don't think Cole Anthony and Gary Harris probably get it done for most of these packages. You would probably have to be a little bit more creative, especially with draft capital, but it's curious. It's interesting to me. Anthony Simons is another guy. I think that you could probably get him for a pretty good package. I think I don't know how healthy it would have to be, but I do think that we probably could afford to go out and get Anthony Simons. I don't think it would cost us something astronomical like a Jalen Suggs, which is exciting because, again, I know a lot of people love Simons. He is an Orlando guy. He is an offense unto himself, basically, and he fits basically everything that we want to be doing. He can play without the ball in his hands. He can play with the ball in his hands. The only thing people talk about is his lack of defense, but we don't need every single guy on the roster to be a world-class defender. I don't think that having one guy who can't defend 1 through 4 is going to be, some super detriment to the team. We got plenty of guys that can help him erase those mistakes. I think it would be exciting. I think if he did come here, he would come off the bench. But, if he's going to win 6th Man of the Year off our bench, I think that'd be an exciting prospect for us, playing close to starter minutes. Finally, Michael Porter Jr. and Zach LaVine. People have talked about Denver needing to move Michael Porter Jr.'s contract. He obviously shoots the absolute skin off the ball. I don't know how he fits on this roster. I have not, really given it more thought other than, oh man, he shoots, and Denver isn't sure what to do with his contract. Could be interesting. And then Zach LaVine, whose value drops lower and lower every single day. I have no idea what Chicago's going to do with Zach LaVine, but I do think that we absolutely could use Zach LaVine in Orlando. I think he's a super exciting player, super fun. I know he has an injury history. I know the contract is enormous, but I just feel like if we could get him for some pretty cheap, maybe he gets through the end of the contract. Again, I don't know who we're really, other than re-signing Paolo at this point, and Jalen, I don't know really what we're spending our money on, right? We got to spend the money at some point. So yeah, having that locked into Zach LaVine, I don't think would be the end of the world, especially with all the other high value contracts we have, and some of the young guys that we have access to. So that could be exciting. Some rentals to think about over the course of this season. I'm going to just rapid fire through these. If you like one, you can hit us up on Twitter. I'll plug that at the end of our show. But Bruce Brown, Malcolm Brogdon, Miles Turner, Brandon Ingram, Brooke Lopez, and Clint Capella. I think of those guys, Lopez is the most interesting to me. I do think Brooke Lopez would be an upgrade over Wendell Carter. Some people might disagree with me on that. That's fine if you do. But what Lopez brings as far as winning, as far as rim protection, as far as defense, I think is something that could be invaluable. If Milwaukee starts going the other direction at any point this season, which is possible. I mean, they're a pretty old team, right? They might look to maybe put some more guys around Giannis, or if they see the writing on the wall and Giannis is headed out the door, they're going to be looking to recoup assets for some of their guys. And I think you could probably get Brooke Lopez for much less than the package I've listed at the beginning of this segment. So super exciting stuff. I just am ready to see what happens. You can call me a trade machine guy if you want. That's fine. But I do think at some level there does have to be consolidation for this roster. There's just too many dudes that need NBA minutes and not enough minutes to go around. That's just the reality. So if we could get better players than even some of the guys that we already like, that would be so exciting and so valuable for the development of Franz, Paolo, and Jalen, if he's able to stay long-term through that. Our next big question on the agenda, how do we handle the tough start to the season? So we have a rather rough schedule. Some notable games before December. Road and home. Road games at Miami, at Memphis, at Cleveland, at Dallas, at OKC, at Phoenix, and then at Lakers, at Clippers. I don't know what those games are actually going to look like. I'm marking them as tough because, it's LeBron and it's Kawhi. So, I mean, at some level, those are kind of scary games. But those are all away before the beginning of December. And then some home games before the beginning of December are Indiana, New Orleans, Indiana again, and Philly. And I believe that's an in-season tournament game. It's pretty sketchy. I mean, there is a real scenario where our record going into December does not look great. I know a lot of people are projecting this team to be closer to the play-in than not. I don't know that I feel that way, but that's what people are going to be talking about coming into December if we're not able to split most of these games down the middle. Which we're going to need to do, right? The mark of a good team is you're going to beat the teams you're supposed to beat. I think some of these teams we are better than, and I do think we need to beat those teams, as well as clean up, the Charlottes of the world, the Detroits of the world, the Trailblazers of the world, right? You need to beat the teams you're supposed to beat if you want to be a good NBA team, right? So just something to keep an eye on as we're moving toward December is sort of what that record looks like. It's going to dictate a lot of, I think, how the media, assuming we get much media attention, is going to dictate a lot of how we're talked about around the league and with other fan bases, and just it's worth keeping an eye on, right? Because we do see the sort of murderers row, some great teams before December. Finally, taking a look at our last question, what should we expect from the in-season tournament? The second season of the in-season tournament this year. We are in a group with the Hornets, the Sixers, the Nets, and the Knicks. I think that's a pretty favorable group for us, generally speaking. I know some people would say that, being in a group with the Knicks and the Sixers is pretty bad. Obviously, those teams are maybe the favorites to come out of the East, not named Boston. But I think that generally speaking, we have played the Sixers pretty well over the years. I think we played Embiid all right. Maybe sort of as well as you can play Embiid. But also, I don't think that we've seen a lot of Jonathan Isaac guarding Embiid over the years. Obviously, we haven't. He's been out of commission, so to speak. So I am excited to see how we sort of stack up against teams like the Knicks, teams like the Sixers. I personally am not sure I'm a Knicks believer. I think that Cat trade is maybe less than good for them. I don't think that's going to be a great defensive team. You've got Cat and Brunson on the floor at the same time. I think they're going to struggle to stop people. Obviously, you do have OG Anunoby, who you're going to play down and have him guarding the Paolos, the Giannis's. But I don't know. Obviously, a lot of people love OG Anunoby, and maybe he'll be enough for them. But I just mentally have this image of Paolo crashing into the lane and throwing one down right on top of him and Karl Anthony Towns, basically stacked under the basket. So we'll see. And then obviously games against the Nets and Hornets, you need to win those. The schedule looks like this. Hornets at Magic, November 12th. Sixers at Magic, November 15th. Magic at Nets, November 9th. And Magic at Knicks, December 3rd. The quarterfinals will be on December 10th and 11th. The semifinals in Vegas will be on the 14th. And the finals in Vegas will be on the 17th. You need to try to win your group if you can. Otherwise, there's a couple spots that they leave available to the next best teams, but ideally you end up not in one of those wild card spots. You end up with the ability to maybe have a home game in that quarterfinal. I think it would be a huge boon for this team to make a run in the in-season tournament. You saw what it did for the confidence last year of a team like Indiana, who got to take on the Lakers in the in-season tournament. Obviously, the Lakers didn't amount to much as a team last season, but giving Tyrese Halliburton, Ben Mathurin, the other folks on that roster, the ability to see how they stack up in a competitive game against a LeBron James is something I would love to see for our guys, right? I would love to see, the Magic against the Celtics in the finals, right? How do we match up against a fully prepared, fully locked and loaded Celtics team? I just think it could be really exciting. I know a lot of people aren't into the in-season tournament or the idea of it, but I'm going to be watching it anyway. I'm already watching all of those games, so why not make them more exciting for me as a fan? I do not see the downside. I tend to think that that's a lot of complaining for the sake of complaining, which we got a lot of that nowadays. But that's why I feel about the in-season tournament. I really think we have an opportunity to surprise a lot of people. All it takes is an upset. Any given night in the NBA, obviously, you can get a win. So that means be careful too. I mean, the Hornets could come into Orlando on the 12th, and LaMelo could go off for 50, and that could be maybe the end of our in-season tournament hopes. So just hopefully playing all those games tough. I trust fully in Coach Mose to keep our guys focused and keep our guys ready. I do think we really have a great opportunity to do some exciting stuff this season. I think this is going to be a great season for Orlando Magic basketball. Not going to make any predictions right now, but I really do hope that we see the improvement that we're hoping to see from guys like Jalen, Franz, Paolo, and it's something worth looking forward to and watching. That's all I got this week for the 407. Make sure to check us out at the 407 Pod, wherever you get your social media. We're talking TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, etc. And tune in next week. We're going to be talking about Media Day and much, much more right here on the 407.